All right, so looks like we are up and running. If you had not had a chance to look at the calendar invite, we'll go ahead and review or talk about any old business if necessary. Update from the policy working group. We started the formation of the project framework working group. That's still under construction here. Went through the project incubation working group. And from the previous meeting, of course, we had the strategy working group that is no longer. We also talked about any updates from our team here in progress towards deliverables. As far as new business here, we're still going to talk about elections as far as replacing Michael Peyton Jones. Additionally, strategy elections for the future, and then a little bit more of an open forum towards what we need to update.
Okay, Doug. We can start off with the policy. I don't know where you left off security-wise.
So we had another meeting yesterday. So basically something that's kind of come to our attention is that we need to get something in place ideally sooner rather than later, so we don't have a dangling, security at Intersect MBO email address with no process attached to it. So I think we've collectively got, if you haven't seen it, I will share now the draft that we have, which I think is in a reasonable state. What we are thinking we can try and do is to so in particular, we propose that there's going to be a role for someone called the security officer, who's basically sort of project managing security issues and is a trusted person and monitors the inbox for issues and then forward them on to people. And what we're proposing is to kind of get someone in place as quickly as possible, ideally with a bit of backup, and then we can have a little bit of breathing room for getting people to agree on something more substantial over time without leaving us with too much of a hole. Since probably we want like the Intersect board to approve what we're suggesting and so on. Selena? Selena, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Selena, go ahead.
Sorry, trying to get back to the tab. So yes, on the security policy draft, one of the things that I saw that was happening in one of the other committees that I wanted to bring up is they were creating stuff for how to do compensation for community members to do this kind of work and to get paid for it, so that you could like have someone who's doing the security portions that has the correct qualifications, that has all that different stuff, and doesn't have to be yet another hire. Are y'all familiar with any of that work that's going on?
No, but I think the concern that certainly we got quite strongly from Kevin and other people is just that the stakes are potentially quite high here, and at least we really want it's worth spending some resources to get some good information discipline around these kinds of vulnerabilities, because we are talking about the Cardano network, which is potentially, millions of dollars of people's money. Mm-hmm. So it's worth. So I think I think it would be worth. I personally think it would be worth having someone who we can afford to actually maybe even get them vetted and have someone who we're willing to put some resources into ensuring is trustworthy, at least as the kind of initial point of contact. I mean, then they're going to be talking to people who work on these projects who might be volunteers, but who hopefully at least have some level of trust associated with them. And obviously those people can't all be employed by Intersect, but I think there was...
Well, normally what happens, like in an umbrella organization, like Hyperledger, for example, what happens there? Well, they don't actually have everything public, right? So what they do, the only thing that they really have public is what are the qualifications to be a part of it, and then how do they handle things. And so what they do on that is the actual committee yes, it had like one of my employees sitting on it, but it also had the security people from all of the other businesses sitting on it as well, because, Linux Foundation is a bit pay to play, but like any of the major projects that were on there all had a person, and they were all required to have a person.
Yeah, so I definitely took a look at the Hyperledger policy. So that's somewhere I think we actually are proposing something I think more stringent than them, because they seem to be happy to have all of those people potentially be privy to issues that came up in any of the projects, which is I think a reasonable position. But I think we were thinking maybe we could get away with having an even more firewalled thing and have a smaller number of people who get to see all the things, and they can then pass that on to the people who really need to know. So I mean I think that's a like a policy decision. I think both those would be reasonable.
Yeah. Well, all of those people who are security people, if they're good security people, they know to keep their mouth shut. I'm just being blunt here.
It just increases your surface, right?
Yeah. If you're not that type of person, you shouldn't be on the committee. I should not be on that committee. But if you are that type of person, my husband is that type of person. He worked at BAE. He had, all the certifications, blah, 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 blah. But one of the things that I did notice that happened from us doing that is they were way faster at fixing things, because of the fact that you had a bunch of other types of blockchain experts in that purview. And so they were very good at like keeping an eye on things. And when something did occur within one blockchain, they're like, oh, this is what we did. And so they were really good about doing that for everyone, for each other, because everybody cares about blockchain, period, not having a bad reputation. And they all had to sign agreements stating that they would not do anything in regards to those. And if they did, that's one advantage that the Linux Foundation has, is it has big legal teeth. Like you do something, the Linux Foundation comes after you, and if you did something like that, the Linux Foundation would destroy you, honestly. They're pretty blunt about it, and we don't have those teeth, so that is true. But I do want to sit there and say there are some different things as to why those things are done that different way. And so if you are doing it that way, you do want to be careful, because whoever that person is going to have to be above reproach. And so far, I haven't seen a lot of that kind of action happening in your community. Just to be fair.
I think one relevant thing here is that we're talking very specifically about the security officer, and the security officer is in an interesting position where they don't actually need most of the things that would normally contribute. They don't need to be super technical. This is basically an administrative position. So it's both trusted, but it's also not necessarily the most interesting community role. They are effectively an organization point. So for people like the insiders, as drafted in the policy, i.e. the people who might be pulled in to consult on issues, to fix specific things, I think that's absolutely somewhere where having community members and having a means to compensate those community members might be extremely important. But I think for this officer role, it's probably not even going to be terribly interesting from a sort of community perspective. And what we really need is somebody, basically, it's going to be easier to employ that particular person, because what they're doing is largely project coordination work. But they also need to be very heavily vetted, because they're going to see all of this data.
Yeah, then I would be careful. I would be with the title on that then, because a security officer implies something else to me. A security officer, like at a company, is someone who goes around doing compliance and things of that nature. I would really consider a different title in regards to that, for that reason.
You call it security coordinator or whatever.
Any suggestions? Very welcome there. Not attached to the names at all.
Yeah.
And then I want to make sure. I'm sorry. I want to make sure Adam gets a chance here.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna chime in that there is also, since Kevin's not here, I feel comfortable speaking for him in this regard. But there's a strong concern about doxing necessarily who that security individual is, that essentially knows all of the secrets and where all the bodies are hidden. So for that reason, I could see that being an incentive to have that be a paid higher position under Intersect who can kind of obfuscate who that central coordinating security person is potentially. But I mean, a leak's going to happen if it's going to happen. Somebody's going to know who that person is. But I know there is a strong sense of kind of keeping the people that are in these security circles hidden from public view to not make them targets was a real concern that's come up in several of the working group meetings. Sorry, go ahead, Salona.
I'm totally Adam. Well, that's why I said some groups do not reveal who their security committee is. They just reveal what are, and that's the thing that I was like looking for in these kind of things, like what, when you're creating the governance for this, for this committee, like some of those pieces are kind of like not there yet. Like what is the qualification? And that's why I was trying to like refer to the others, like what are the qualifications of someone sitting on this? So you want to be on it, you want to apply, you want to be, the title I think you put on there was insider, for example. What are the qualifications of an insider going to be? Not just what they do, but what qualifies them to be that. Like I said, like at Hyperledger, one of the things that we did is sat there and said, everybody from a project has to be on this committee in some form. And it was a requirement of the project to sit there and say, no, you have to have someone who sits on the committee that we know we can talk to and will respond to and will handle all of those things securely. And like I said, not be public on those. But once people know that these are the qualifications for each of them, then they know, oh, someone's taking care of that. Does that make sense? And
yeah,
then
I think it's a great idea.
And then figuring out what the reporting policies are going to be on this. So you have all these different things for that, but I don't see one in regards to also what's the rules that they're going to be held by. Like do they sign an NDA? Obviously you have a CLA, but what else are you going to have in regards to that? So that you could actually, know what those things are. And so where those, we need to find those policies in this, so that people know. The structure that y'all are creating, that's cool. Yeah, sure. Go for it. These are just things I see that are like glaringly missing that I would like be concerned about. Because if you want to be transparent, but security level transparent in regards to open source, it's like those are the kind of the things that they'll want to see. They'll want to see what your process is for nominating and what those qualifications would be. You can sit there and say very clearly, we do not put those people out because we are worried about them being doxxed. And the majority of the community will go, yeah. Because they know that crypto is a tough space. And then if you sit there and say, and here's the reporting processes, are also, really important, and how that fits in with the boards and things of that other sort of stuff, I think is also crucial to putting in here. So they're saying, here's what the, basically, we're not going to tell you about a 0 day, but we'll tell you after the 0 days are resolved, what we went through and how we resolved it and what our processes were for that. And that's the kind of thing that like people would want to see on some of that. So Juan, with compliance, it's again a bit different than I think what they're talking about. Yeah, it's that I think they're talking more about a sorting methodology to prevent 0 days from getting spread throughout all of the other throughout a competitive ecosystem. Compliance is something that needs to be part of that process, that we're transparent about, that we don't show the things going through it, but we do show it in the after effects. Does that make sense in the definitions of done?
Thanks. That's all helpful. I definitely don't think this is done. To be clear, the thing that the reason we were sort of bringing it up now is partly just because we realized that we maybe need to take some steps to do something in the short term, which is a bit annoying. Yeah. And there's a lot of gaps. Like we need to come up with systems for managing all this information as well. So we get some tools from GitHub. We can use their security advisories, which provide some reasonable facilities for private communication and sharing information, but we might need more stuff. I'm not really sure what we're going to do there.
I do believe the TSC has an interim person in mind, just to fulfill that. And we already got the security alias set up. So as soon as I get that name, I'll add them.
So we've actually spoke. Well, I spoke to the person that they have in mind yesterday. Started chatting with him about the process. So he generally seemed relatively on board, and I sent him the draft. So
okay.
But we'd I think we'd still want to try and get a fully sensible version of this policy done sooner rather than later, I think. And especially if we're going to ask that Intersect actually devotes resources, like actually devotes a hire to this, or part of a hire, I don't know, maybe, I don't think this is going to be a full-time job, then we need to make sure we have something sensible, and we need to probably get Intersect higher management to agree to that. And if we need an NDA, we probably need the legal team needs to get involved and stuff, so it'll start to become complicated.
I think there's an NDA draft somewhere. I can get that pulled out.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain Intersect already has an NDA, probably with all of its direct employees anyway, so that you can probably just kind of tweak it slightly to say even more so, don't talk about the security things. The first rule of Security Council is you don't talk about Security Council, and you're good to go.
I don't know whether you'd have a different NDA like Solona. Maybe whether you'd have a different kind of NDA.
That's exactly. You were reading my mind.
Yeah.
You do not want a generalized NDA. I will not sign it. Sorry, Christian, but yeah, not happening. They sent me a generalized one, and I'm like, that would be contradictory to other NDAs I hold. You have to have a very specific style one for this, where it is specifically about the information that you find out about in this committee, what that means, da 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 da. In fact, what I was just typing in as Michael called it out is that oftentimes you have very specific NDAs in these nonprofits for anything involving strategy as well. Like IEEE has that. So if you're on the board of directors for IEEE or on the board of directors of IEEE SA or one of their societies or committees, anything that has any level of fiduciary responsibility and strategic, where you have any type of thing where you do have to worry about competition in some form, you do an NDA, but you do a very specific type of NDA because of the fact that, like, if you're on the board for some of these things, you're normally on the board of many things, and you can't have a sweeping one like the typical Intersect one. So you really do need to have something that's constructed for that. So thank you.
Totally you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, it's just NDAs are such a pain in the ass. I understand them, and I have my own, but you really have to watch how you write them because actually I'm still having some discussions with IOG on that. Because they're like this, and I'm like, no, you don't get that. You don't get this either. Because I have so many different companies that own so many things. So,
I've always seen them as the terms and agreements with every software license.
Don't even get me started on that, Christian. You see how much I bitch about terms and agreements on LinkedIn, because they're such pieces of crap. But yeah, I know this writing our own. So for my business and my nonprofit, so it's kind of like, no, overreach. And the funny thing about it is that I don't understand why people do that, because it's not going to hold up in court.
Yeah, especially when you can just click the down arrow and go straight to signing. Do we have anything else on security updates?
I don't think so. So just to I guess our actions are to keep working at getting a better, more accessible full policy. Try and get some agreement that this person that Intersect is considering can act as an interim security officer, perhaps with some backup from other trusted people like Kevin and Sam Lados or something in the short term, and then try and get that situation done properly as soon as possible.
Okay.
This became relevant because security issues continue to occur while time passes. There is we can't just be like, no one reports any security issues while we're sorting our shit out, right? Like that's not sadly that's not an option. Yeah,
okay.
that's it.
Well, so for the other working group, originally it was going to be just project incubation, but after talking with Bogdan, we're going to split it because the framework still has a strategy deliverable and incubation's a subset of that. But I think incubation's kind of its own animal, which should be done in parallel and they can be independent. So we're forming two different working groups, one to focus on lifecycle, one to focus on incubation. And I'll hand it over to Bogdan to talk about the framework side of it.
Yeah, thank you. So as Christian said, in my opinion, at least, incubation is part of the end-to-end life cycle framework. Why? Because stays somehow in between of creating a new thing. So everything starts, let's say, with an idea or a new feature that or on technical refactoring or whatever it is. So I have an idea, I'm thinking on the idea, and then depending on how this idea is clustered, will take or not the decision for the certain project to be incubated. So being incubated is to help to grow, right? And then after the incubation, we might transition to a growth phase or a maturity phase until the sunsetting. Anyway, so this is the reason I was thinking that the incubation is part of the larger and broader end-to-end life cycle framework, and thinking like incubation is not detached. So it's something that comes before the incubation and something that comes after the incubation. So this was the reason. Now, having two working groups, okay, good, fine with me, no problem. I will try to present you some early thoughts that I have. I started having in mind a general and quite well-known framework of product life cycle. And then I was thinking, okay, this is quite established, the product life cycle, but here on open source and Cardano, we are talking about project life cycle. And this is the first thing that I want to establish with you. What means a project for you and for Cardano in contrast of what is a product? And actually, it's not an easy question. For example, when I'm doing interviews for product positions, one of my favorite questions is, how would you define or draw the line, the differentiation between a project and a product? And I have to admit, it's a quite difficult question. Now, what do you think? It's any differentiation for you at Cardano on Intersect about a project and a product, or we can put more or less the equal sign between these two words? Any thoughts? Michael?
I'm not sure we in this setting need to care that much about products. And I think the concept of a project, I think that's reasonably, like, for most of the things we're going to deal with, that's going to be some collection of software repositories and the people who work on them. And we kind of don't care whether or not they are advertising those to the world as a product or a collection of products. If it's a collection of people working on the same software, then I think probably from our perspective, it can be a project. And this was one of the suggestions in the sort of the governance draft, was that kind of goes together with being governed together. If you have a group of people who work on something together and they govern it together, then that's a project.
Yeah.
Ilona? So I've been having to address this almost directly. One of the things that I'm doing in regards to the breakdowns that I'm trying to create by attending all these different meetings and saying, oh my gosh, all these people are overlapping, is this would be an overlap. Product is definitely the purview of a different committee, not this one. Instead, think of best practices in regards to projects that are being for open source, right? I see what you're trying to say in regards to product, but I'm trying to say, okay, let me break it down in a different way for you. There is a product manager and a project manager. What are the differences between those two roles? A project manager makes sure that things get done. A product manager makes sure that it represents that the customers want it, right? So in regards to open source committee, it's not really the purview, from what I've been understanding it, in regards to the divisions between each of these different groups of productization. It's about projects and its processes for those projects and things of that nature. And what does that look like? So I really want to caution saying product. I know that you're trying to do it as a collection of projects, but please understand that when you start to do that, there's going to probably be a overstepping of boundaries and scope.
Okay, good. I was willing to understand if it's a differentiation, and if it's a differentiation, which is this differentiation. Okay, good. I totally agree with all points. Now, if I were in the position to think a bit more, and I totally agree. This is my point of view as well. From the project perspective, actually, I don't care if the product that was built based on the project has any adoption, or if the product itself that was based on the project is doing well, right? So the only thing that I care is to be done on time, on budget, and so on. So if we are talking about post-mortem or achieved, how they are called, I think, in Hyperledger terminology. So when something is on the end of life, do I care as a project manager or from the project perspective that this thing it's somehow ready to be closed? Maybe I care only from the perspective of the things that I should do at the end of the project, right? Is that correct?
I feel like maybe there's a bit of a confusion here that I do think the sense in which a project manager talks about projects, they are usually implied to be temporally scoped, right? Like you have a project to add a feature to something or so on. When we talk about a project in the open source community, we usually mean something that is an ongoing thing that has a life of its own. It's not usually temporally scoped in that way. They're not done. They have a life of their own. And so I do think that's a potential confusion.
Okay.
So, I don't think many of these projects are going to be done. That very rarely happens. Maybe Donald Knuth claims that tech is done, but like most software projects are not ever done. They might die, but they and just one other thing I want to ask this, which is that we do have quite a lot of examples of this sort of stuff that we can borrow from other people, right? Like all most of the other software foundations project life cycles. Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree with this very rough and early way of setting the phases for a project, starting with the idea, then a moment in time when we assess this potential idea, if it's feasible, viable, and so on, then doing a kind of prioritization based on some set of metrics that we care about, then having maybe a validation phase before the incubation. Maybe not everything is going to be incubated. We have to vet and decide what is going to be incubated or what is going to start their own life by their own, and then having the maturity phase and the sunsetting phase. What do you think about these phases?
Well, start with Salona there.
Yes, I did want to let everybody know that Again, and a lot of different projects are, a lot of the different working groups are creating similar structures like this, by the way, because of the fact that we haven't been cohesive in regards to coordinating on all of this. GovTools is doing it, and they're getting super granular. You know, y'all are doing it. DevX is doing it. There's a bunch of different groups that are going through this process, and it's a little, I just want to do a little bit of expectation management on some of that, because it does seem that like so many different groups are doing that, that there might be a little bit of a clash over vocabulary and things of that nature. But I believe that, you know, one of the things I always like to say about design is, honestly, a lot of this is just the scientific method revisited. And everybody has their little flavor of what that is in regards to make a hypothesis, validate the hypothesis, you know, go through this whole thing. And so just, I do agree with these sort of things. Yes. Just manage internal expectations in regards to the fact that lots of other people are doing similar things to this, and we need to be careful about how we take this out there to get buy-in.
Nick?
But wait a second, because you are saying that many other people are doing more or less the same thing. We have this project framework working group was established. Why? Because actually we have this goal that was already discussed to establish, and the first action is to establish the project lifecycle framework.
Well, to be in conjunction of that, not everybody in the communities attending our committee meetings are seeing the recordings or meeting minutes. So they're doing it without knowing the overlap, as Salona's saying. The reason we started the group was so that we know where projects are. And like continually with me getting on GitHub, some teams may be like, okay, we no longer want to support this project. Then we have to figure out what's the future of it, because now it's going in the dying phase. And there should be a process in place to like manage stuff like that.
All right, let's just jump on track here. We're going to go Nick, Michael, Salona, and we'll go from there.
I mean, mine's just, I think mine might be superfluous in the case of, you know, we need to coordinate with others, but it was, you know, my only comment was going to be that life cycle looks good for an arbitrary project, but I would say some of those phases are not appropriate for the sort of open source, for the specifically Intersect stuff. So the ideation phase, for example, you know, I would imagine that we would start with the validation phase. You know, a project, it may have an idea and it may be assessed, but that doesn't seem that that's Intersect's responsibility. Intersect presumably comes where someone has a project that they want to bring inside Intersect. That could be internally, it could be externally, but it should start with here is a project that already has some idea established and some assessment, and the case is we have to look at that and validate, is this something that we actually want to incubate? So I would say probably in our use case, we should truncate the prefix of this.
So what you are saying, these two parts not making too much sense in context of Intersect, right?
To me, yes. You know, in that we would start with looking at something that someone has designed and decided, like, do we want to be involved with it?
So still having validation or directly with incubation?
No, I mean, because we need to go through a validation phase of like someone brings a project. The first step we do is like, is this something which actually Intersect is going to want to? So we go through that validation phase where we look through, we assess, you know, does this project make sense? Should we bring it in? Does it need to be funded, etc.?
To interject on that, because it's part of the even Hyperledger example. If someone wants to incubate, there's acceptance criteria that they have to fulfill, and then that project can denote what maturity phase they want to come in, but it's still up to Hyperledger's technical oversight committee, I think it is, who evaluates and then puts them in the right maturity block.
Yeah, but basically there would still be like a pre-incubation phase where you're looking at, do you meet the criteria that have been established and working that out.
Yeah.
But Nico, one question I'm asking because I'm not so used in the work that Intersect does. Isn't possible, for example, as member of the community or the Intersect itself. I don't know. I'm a full employee of Intersect, and I have an idea. I'm thinking that this idea is pretty good. How can I this idea? It is not yet established.
I mean, the point is, when we incubate something that might be incubated as a very early stage project, if, for example, that there's within things that have been incubated, we have the idea that there are multiple different stages of maturity. So one could incubate a very mature project that already has a big, established user base and a well-defined code base. And we want to say that's going to be something, so for example, the existing Cardano projects were done. One might also incubate a very early stage project that has a lot of potential. So, the incubation might lead to multiple different things, but actually the ideation phase, yeah.
But what
exactly.
happens, for example, if I have a queue of projects on different stages, even that is super early or more mature?
Yeah, that's what we expect.
Yes, and this queue is continuously feeding or somehow overwhelming one of the committees. So here above of this one, we have the generation of the queue, right? And this queue somehow, in my opinion, should be somehow managed. We need a process.
That's the thing that makes this we're not a centralized organization that generates projects, funds them, and pushes them forwards. We're talking about a process of developing open source software. Where do these projects come from? Someone in the community has an idea. Open your editor and starts typing, right? Like, that's where projects come from. Intersect doesn't make them happen. If they then come up and say, oh, hey, I want this to be an official Intersect project, fine. But then we're looking at validating what they've done, working out whether it's something that we want to bring to the fold. But sure, if you're a company, then maybe you say, well, we need to explicitly allocate time from individuals to do that work. But I'm not sure that is something that we would.
But still,
Okay.
wait a second. It's a kind of management work here. Even that these people are just opening the editor and they are writing, someone should read what these people wrote, right?
That's who. They can do whatever they want. It's open source software. You want people to look at your software, post it on the internet, try and get people excited. Like, that's not our job, right? Like, that's just the world,
And the first step of the validation process may be to look at who the hell is even interested in this. If J Random Blogs comes with like one line idea and says, hey, we'll Intersect fund it, we take a look at it and we're like, yeah, no, that's it. They then come back and they say, here we've got actually a bunch of people interested. Here are all the community members that back it, etc., etc. Then we might take a look at it for an additional 5 minutes and say, yeah, okay, maybe give us this stuff and we.
So
we gotta let Salona add a comment, and then we gotta take the conversation to the working group that Bogdan will set up, and we can establish.
Okay.
If anyone's interested, just add comments. Salona.
Sure. So working with the ecosystem and the civics and all the different pieces on the regards to the product, sitting there saying that we're going to go through and validate the ideas and do all that kind of stuff is out of scope for the open source committee. And that is one thing with the ecosystem group, why we're tagging in with Catalyst and the Cardano Foundation and all of those other different groups, because we do want to figure out what the funding models are going to look like and what those end up being. What will happen with the OSC is those things will come in and we will be doing the validation and doing those different things to sit there, just like in like labs or projects at Hyperledger, where we sit there and say, we think these things are valuable, and those things will probably feed into that funding process. But it's outside of the scope of the TSC to be validating ideas and products and funding models. That's not going to happen here. I'll just tell you that right now. With the different groups that I'm discussing with, that would like offend Catalyst and CF and all of the other different groups right now. So I think the thing to think about is looking at like what other groups have done before, and Hyperledger being an example. There's other examples. It's not just Hyperledger. It's any umbrella organization goes through this process. They go through, how do we allocate our nonprofits' resources towards these open source projects? The Linux Foundation does it as well. Apache Foundation says, well, we're not going to. Eclipse Foundation also, tries to figure out how do they allocate those resources and what those patterns are. But it's not like exactly what Michael was saying. It's open source. You don't tell people anything. They do the different things. If they want the funding, they go through the other procedures. The funding is not a purview of the OSC. And so, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
The framework marks what life cycle piece you're in. The incubation is how you can get on Intersect's GitHub, essentially. So.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Can I just one last comment, which
Michael?
is, it'd be really nice to sort out the jurisdiction issue. Like, we had this problem from day one, in that it's super unclear what is in our remit and so on. And like, this is a great example where we're like, well, it doesn't seem like anyone else is thinking about this. I guess someone has to come up with some kind of project maturity thing. And now Sona's like, wait, everybody's doing that. This is stupid. It'd be really nice to not have this problem. I don't know. I'm gonna point my finger at Christian and say, can you?
I'm working on that between OSC and TSC.
Annoying.
There's a racy draft to get conversations started, so it is on the agenda for next week for TSC. And Salona's doing it from the other angle, so we'll get this figured out.
Okay, and then Martian and One to One, I know y'all had your hands up earlier. If you have something, feel free to send me a message or let us know if we need to get you on that working group specifically.
The next big topic we had was from George. He put an initial draft for 3 documents. One is the maintainer, or definition of what is a maintainer. The next one is the roles and responsibilities and then how you become. And those are to be commented on, and so we can get something more structural in place. Over to you, George.
Yes, thank you very much. I will be really fast because I saw the time is pushing us. Mainly, I will present you the essence of what I work, not exactly the work, because I count on you to give the feedback and put a lot of comments in the document. Here are the sources of information which I use to extract the common parts, attributes, and functions or actions to define an Intersect MBO maintainer. The sources you recognize here, one of these is the inner source. Please follow the link I gave you because it's a really, really, really interesting piece of experience from the ground and from the practice. This is the Silona's book. Once again, thanks again. And you will find there a lot of details about the maintainer role, which is in fact an evolution and a role completed with a trusted committer. You will find this new role in the inner source book of Silona. So all these sources were analyzed, researched, and the common elements were put in 3 outputs: the definition of the maintainer, the responsibilities, and the personal development path of someone who wants to become a maintainer. Please give me your feedback. In the messenger, I gave you a link to these 2-3 slides, and here you will find the links to the 3 documents. The documents are not created with a huge volume of information. They are compacted, able to be used as small pages connected on GitHub, on Gitbooks, anywhere where the developer will have access to understand what's about this maintainer role. Thank you very much.
Can I just say I love what you did in regards to all this? Of course, I'm completely biased, everyone. This is my checklist.
Yeah.
So take it with a grain, big old grain of salt. I'm probably missing some stuff. If you see that there's missing stuff, it's probably my fault. So let me know. I do like how you added in there about the security portion, because there often is an overlap between that security discussion that we were just having
Exactly.
and the maintainers. Like, yeah, mwah. Thank you so much for putting that in there. That's a beautiful ad. But yeah, I'm obviously not going to say much other than that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to be seen, because I found a really, really nice way to make a jump and not follow the normal steps that the people are following in the natural evolution of the maturity. We can make a jump directly on the last level, and we were helped by your book. Thank you, Silona.
Anything else for anybody on old business or current work here, or we could move on to elections?
So last thing on incubation, because it ties into project support services as well. I'll be going to the Builder Fest and meeting with all our builders and open source project people and trying to collate a list of things that they need from Intersect for help, and use that kind of as a baseline to start from. So the working group will meet after that next week. Yeah. And yeah, I'll add you to it, Silona, no issue.
Okay. Juan,
I just
Sierra?
haven't started anything yet.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I was listening to the conversation, and I just, every time I come to these working groups, I realize that the most important thing is to have something that we all need, which is have the common language and the common verbiage, the common jargon, if you will. And I've been participating in Odin. It's a project very, very interesting. They are using S3 sociology, sociocracy 3, and I recommend that you guys take a look at that as a way to get the tensions away, and also make the proposals in the right way, so we have more expedite work, and it's a little more organized. And I know, like everything else, everything is we are experimenting, but that's a great way to experiment. S3, I think, is changing my life and is helping me a lot, and I'm very happy to be here to be able to tell you that. It's Odin, Adion. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know that you gave me the opportunity to talk, but I was kind of setting up my computer and I didn't. So my apologies. And awesome conversation, by the way. Thanks.
Ogden, you got something?
Yes, I just forgot to mention that next week should be the first meeting of the working group. I sent an invite by email in the calendars for Silona, Alex, and Daniel. If anyone else wants to join, please let me know. And also, if you can make it, please accept this invitation. So to be sure that we'll have the first meeting, it's set for Tuesday. I wrongly sent the invite for the last Tuesday instead of 23rd. It was on 16th, but I just modified to 23rd this Tuesday next week. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, and if you weren't included and want to be included, if you can just put it in the chat here, and we'll make sure we get you put to the right place. Has anybody done anything offline as far as elections, or we're leaving that to our community discussion here? Just wondered if there's anything drawn up.
I think the line item we need to take care of today is nominees for the vice chair for Michael. Essentially, the responsibility just includes helping set the agenda each week for the committee meeting.
Madam?
Yeah, so I did share a draft of kind of some of my rough thoughts on the overall Intersect governance and election process, because we're all talking about like this big annual members meeting where we're all going to vote on some stuff come October, and literally nobody has any clue how this is working at all. And like we've said before, this isn't really our job, but we seem to be always at the forefront of needing to make all these definitions, like Juan just said, like what is the governance process. So I started writing down some thoughts as part of, like I said, my involvement with the community advisory group that's kind of formed. So I was already doing that work, and it just kind of so happens to overlap here. The TLDR, I think that what we need to do right now is ratify and at least just try some things. So I recommend in there that we give like a 2-week period of an open call via the Intersect public comms, that anybody that wants to nominate themselves to replace Michael's seat can raise their hand, and we can see how many nominees we get, and that might define whether or not we even need an election. Because if only one person stands up and says, I even want to be on this committee, then problem solved. We don't have to have a voting system in place just yet. And otherwise, we can figure it out. But as far as I know, Christian, you're probably more versed in this, as well as Ryan, working on kind of how membership is even going to be ratified and codified via the HubSpot or whatever. Right now, we don't even have an accurate list of who is a member of this organization, as far as I'm aware. So it's going to be really hard to try to get all of the members to participate in an election process or some sort of a, so like we do whatever we need to do. If we do a Discord poll or whatever, based on whoever's interested in showing up to replace the seat in the short term. But let's try some things and see what works, and then at least we'll have some communal experience. And I was looking at some of Salona's references. I think it was, who was it that, is it Hyperledger that has the cool blockchain based voting system already?
It's not, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, there was one that you could log in with GitHub or
Yeah.
Google or something like that. I was looking at that, and that was cool. And we also have good community tools like Summon and some other things. But like ultimately, we need to know the list of GitHub users or email addresses or whatever at the end of the day that represents the body of members in Intersect. So
Well,
yeah, no, the
insight. I'm hoping end of month they'll actually have the member data sorted. So I'll bring updates on that as I learn it. So
yeah, so perfect timing, right? Because Michael's leaving us at the end of the month. But yeah, and that gives us, right, if we kind of do an announcement today asking for a show of hands for who's interested, we have about 2 weeks to at least gather willing nominees. But yeah, I think for my money, we have to just kind of steamroll ahead because everybody keeps kicking the can to somebody else to figure it out. And we're just in this big continuous circle of kicking the can around. So
Yeah.
So I've been trying to support you, Adam, on this because I agree with you. So one of the things, because how that committee got born is actually, honestly, how a lot of committees should actually be born in an open source world. And the fact that y'all are tackling the governance is a beautiful thing. And I tried to express this earlier on when I sat there and told them that oftentimes you get what's called like either a community steering committee or an executive steering committee, and they are the ones who do the first pass at all of the governance and then send it down to the community for validation and then bring it to the board for ratification, and then it gets implemented. And what you do is you do make sure that if you are like a 501c3 or a 501c6, you're following all of the legal precautions that also need to take place within some of those processes, like declaring affiliations to avoid antitrust and things of that nature. So thank you. It's great what y'all are doing, and I love all the research that you're putting into it when you're doing it. It's very heartening for me to see and watch the different things, and I'll steal some from some of the stuff that you've created as well. So thank you. But yeah, there is that disconnect that is happening, which I think is causing a lot of that confusion for those different pieces. And it so needs to get nailed down. And thank you so much for both participating in both of those committees, because that's the glue that we need with this type of thing getting born. Is if you don't have those gelling people, those connectors to make sure all that information passes around, you'll have a problem. And that's one reason why I'm so committed to doing that. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And I posted the link of it too here just in case. So if anybody wants to go in there and look and start making some commentary on it, please do so, because we need to really make sure that this is all of us buying in on it together. And so I love the idea that you're going to bring that forward to the community. That's, yeah.
And to back up Adam's thesis too, our open source committee unintentionally is being kind of like the process testing for a lot of stuff because we're further along than a lot of others. So I think we're going to continually be hitting the ceiling on a lot of things. But as long as we make sure there's CYA and all the players are involved, I think we're okay.
All right. I know there's not lots of time as far as open forum. Does anybody have any hot topics that we need to discuss right here at the moment?
Do we want to throw a party for Michael at the end of the month? Just kidding.
I mean, not sure what kind of party you have in mind, unless you all want to come to London.
I'll be in France nearby.
Yeah, Michael, you take the tube over to Paris. I'll be there Sunday, and we'll get a bottle of wine to celebrate your next step of your career.
And just for you, I am going to keep the emojis on the Gitbook page just in your honor.
You know what's close to my heart, Christian, and that you can stab in it.
So last piece here, I just included our group email that we have here for the open source office team at Intersect. And so if there's anything that you're needing, if you're wondering who you send that to, go ahead and send it directly to that email. It's monitored by both myself and Christian. And so if there's something specific that we need to take a look at, we can discuss that when we are going through the agenda meetings each week. So
last thing, all the committee members should have gotten an invite to the ClickUp space for tracking all the working group things going in progress. I think that's the central standard. Just let us know if you have issues logging into that, or if you didn't get the invite to begin with. We have to go through our IC team on that, unfortunately.
all right, well, if nothing else, we'll go ahead and close this out here, and hope everyone has a good day, good weekend.
Thank you. See you again.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
Bye.